let's go to the courthouse
See
and
who's
let's
there.
see how many of the 39 judges there are. Wait, 13, 10, 16, right, 39.
Yep.
How many do you think? Let's make a bet. I think too, like our local judges are predominantly the sources. Like I know for a fact that like Joan Byer was a source for Courier Journal, 100%.
Oh, she would lie about not letting the press in a hearing, and she would. Oh, I've had her tell me that she was going to let us come in at a specific time because I had a high profile case, and the press was kind of around the courtroom looking for us. Come in this way. Come in on this floor. I'll even let you in the back door. We'll come in. We'll get it done before the press, can pick up on it, because I know that this could affect your client's reputation and like this stuff. Okay, great. I mean, you don't have to do that as a judge. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be public if the press is there. But great, I'm going to take advantage of that as an advocate for my client. Well, I get there, and not only are they in the courtroom, but they've obviously had all the time in the world to set up. And she starts by making a statement, and totally different than the way she would normally do it. And she's just set it up, the whole thing. And I remember walking in and I just realized I'd be like, yep. She absolutely has set this up to grandstand.
Yep. And I think that's the system. Like, so then the news is like, well, the judge is my source, and then I can get clickbait. And now they just go down to the courthouse and watch the arraignments. I mean, that's the only thing they seem to report on.
Yeah, but I mean, so think about this. You have a judge who is a source for the media, and you have something that mine was a alleged domestic violence case. It was someone who was prominent that people in the community would have heard about, and it could have affected his job. And the judge, as a source, has the press there, and they're going to see how she rules on this case.
Mm-hmm.
That the public is going to think, oh, this guy's a terrible guy.
Right.
You think there's any pressure on her to rule in a specific way? Are you
Right.
kidding me?
Right.
And that was something that in the middle of it, I asked for a recess to talk to opposing counsel and got something worked out very favorable for my client, because it was just so obvious that she was grandstanding. She was grandstanding about the issue, about domestic violence. And in fact, when we settled it and agreed to handle it in the divorce case that was being filed by opposing counsel, she did everything in her power to talk them out of settling it, and was playing it up for the cameras, like pushing and pushing and pushing to get the parties to not agree on it.
That she never would have done if it was pro se. Or she never would have done if it was just a typical domestic violence day.
So them being a source and inviting them into the courtroom, I think on its face doesn't look like a conflict of interest. But if you are ruling on something that the public would be outraged if you ruled in a different way, regardless of what the facts or the case dictated, that's such a clear conflict of interest. And I know you're right. That's the one person I know that was a regular source for the press. I know it happens in other places. You probably know a lot better than I do who those other sources might be.
Yeah, well, in Louisville, we've got McKay Chavan, who is the court administrator, but he's a retired judge, and he actively is a spokesperson for judges, which I think is a violation of the judicial canons. I mean, really, they shouldn't have a spokesperson, a press secretary talking about rulings, like in a way to control the media. But I know for a fact he squashed the story with WDRB when we had the selfie recording of the TikTok judge. Like, they were going to do a story on it, like 100%. And then he filled out some questions basically just saying that I didn't understand things and that the judges have a right to educate the public.
That's interesting. So, I mean, it's hard for me to weigh in on that because I don't know what the actual position entails. I can see it being, if he represents the judiciary here, and I mean, there's got to be a PR aspect to that, and I can see that being correct for him to do from this is your job kind of thing. But then he's a judge. He's an ex-judge. He's representing judges. You have different rules than most other employees or most other people that would be in a position. I don't know enough about it. I would be speaking out of ignorance, but that is fascinating.
It makes everybody feel a certain kind of way, right?
But I mean, ultimately, the result is acting to keep. I mean, it's interesting to say the judges have an obligation to educate the public, but in effect, what you're doing by making that statement and defending the judge's behavior is making sure that the public doesn't get to know about that particular instance.
Literally.
You just keeping the judiciary here in this county from being embarrassed by the activities that just look really bad from one particular judge. Oh, man.
McKay. And then I don't think the Courier-Journal, they're not going to report on anything unless it is about a politician for as far as family court. So obviously they covered Matt Bevin's case. But I don't think that I've ever seen anything in the Courier-Journal critical of outcomes of family court. Have you?
I think there have been some weird opinions that I've heard that there were articles critical of, but I think it was, and I'll have to look, but I mean, there's been judges who refuse to grant a divorce to someone for odd reasons.
Yes, that was Monica Meredith out of Bullitt County, but that's not Louisville.
No, that's not in Louisville. I think something was written about it. I think granting custodial rights to a fetus warranted a few articles in the press. I don't think...
Did the Courier write about that?
I don't know that the Courier did. What I know is no one that I knew from outside of the legal community, outside of the family law community, even knew about it. But I think that it did get talked about, maybe in some small way, in some press.
And so for reference, this is Judge, almost said Adams, Judge Lauren Ogden, that declared, I guess, a fetus a child and awarded custody of a fetus to a pregnant mother without confirmation that she was pregnant.
Temporary custody, I believe. I believe that it was a DVO hearing.
It was.
And the woman claimed to be pregnant, and she awarded,
I think it was on Zoom, too. Maybe not. I could be wrong on that. But that sounds like Division 4.
It's an odd circumstance. And I think I remember reading something about it, although it may have been on someone's blog. I typically... Most of what I hear about that our judges do is from other attorneys' blogs or, people that write short articles about published opinions and things like that. Less in the Courier or anywhere like that.
But people are much more likely to touch traffic court or family court than they ever are, circuit court felony stuff or high asset fights there. And so it's just perplexing to me that there's not more reporting on it.
I also think if I'm a reporter, a multi-day jury trial or a jury trial where you're going to get a ruling that day, you're waiting for the jury to come back, that is far more interesting. If you're making a report for the Daily News or you're doing a news piece on air, that's a lot more interesting than something that, both sides presented, and it's a complex issue, and it could be 6 months before we hear about it. It's going to be hard to get people's attention that way.
That's true.
So I get that aspect of it, but to the extent that we have judges that are sources to the press, what is the goal? I felt like
control the narrative.
But why? So
it's all
I didn't
about
understand.
Politics.
Byer retired before she ran again. She wasn't in any danger of being removed that I had heard of, and I had to try to remove her from cases for some of the things that she did that I saw her doing on video and would have to, file motions to recuse her. But she never seemed to get in any trouble. There was no heat on her, and she wasn't, I don't believe, planning to run again at that time. So what would be the point, of her wanting to leak things and set things up for the press?
I think so many of these judges are just doing it for power. Like they just want to be quote unquote famous. The reality is, any good litigators that work 40 hours a week that are making less than what these judges are. They're all making more.
I don't know that. I think probably. I think there was a time where, this makes me feel old. I know in 2011 was the first time I believe that the ABA Journal published that less than 50% of people coming out of law school had jobs. And a lot of schools in the next 7-8 years following that closed their law schools, shrunk the size because it was getting flooded. There was a period of time where I could have an attorney for less than a paralegal, and I could do that for years, and I was able to hire them. Now, I always wanted to pay bonuses and keep good people, and we wanted to pay really well, but the starting non-guaranteed money was, a fraction of what judges made. And now I was just starting out. I couldn't afford, when it was just me working to hire people for more. So it was helpful to me. And, but I know for a long time, attorneys were struggling. I knew a lot of people when I lived in DC that just worked contract jobs on the side because, their litigation practice couldn't earn enough to live in that city.
Which is like a whole different thing, though. People that decide hey, I want to work so I could have security and have health insurance.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about anybody that's a solo practitioner that's successful. When I was practicing, I didn't often work 40 hours a week. I mean, I tried to take some time off and travel and do all of that. That's what I loved about practicing was the flexibility. But these judges, I guess to go back to why are they sources, they want the attention. They want the fame. They want to be the quote unquote good guy, good girl,
I mean, I guess that's the same motivation for wanting to go on TikTok. I don't know
LOL.
if there's really a motivation to try to get reelected and you're going to be able to do it by TikTok. In this political age, who knows? Maybe that works. But I could never figure it out with Judge Beyer back in the day why. I don't know. And maybe it could have been my client at the time. She just, I mean, some people just did not like him. There were lots of people coming out of the woodwork to take him down. It was pretty rough.
You shouldn't be the judge,
No, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And at the time, opposing counsel was not involved in that aspect of it. The opposing side changed counsel and got someone who was very much involved in trying to do things behind the scenes to put pressure on my client.
Okay.
But not at the time that happened, the first time that it happened with Judge Beyer inviting them in and having a whole gallery of press waiting when we walked into the courtroom, expecting that we were going to have a short private hearing.
And then told you the opposite. Well, and the thing about Joan, and, I came back in 2014. So for anyone listening, Louisville Family Court had a complete flip. Like it was all new judges for the most part. I think one maybe stayed, but there were
two. Haney in 2 and Sherlock stayed in 10
for a little bit.
Yep.
And I was in front of Joan one time, and she started a DVO without me being present. Like I was in a different courtroom. And she was rude. She was all the things. I mean, I was shocked about her demeanor. And then, of course, I ran into her, a year later, and she wants me to use her as a mediator. And, are you the nicest person that's ever lived? But I do think there is something to be said about judges in general having favorites or treating attorneys differently that practice in front of them all the time, as opposed to outside counsel.
Oh, sure. No, I agree completely. But I also know that they're human, and that's going to be part of it. And we were talking earlier about judges in smaller towns and I do believe that there are judges who want to be good civil servants and they go in there because they love their community and want to do it. In fact, the former judge in Oldham County, Judge Feely, he just cared about his community, and you could tell, and he wanted to do what was right, regardless of whether it was within the rules of the law. But he knew everybody in that community, and there was no way around that.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have a judge from the towns that he, where he worked and where he lived, where he wouldn't know everybody. And that's just going to be part of it. I don't think you can get that out of the system. And in fact, making someone from a different county be a judge over, a specific county doesn't seem quite right either. I mean, when you're dealing with jury trials, you want the jurors to be representative of you. You want them to be your peers to a certain extent, although it's not explicit in any founding documents or, in the law. You kind of want your judge to be part of that community.
Part of the community. It's like police officers. I mean, you really want policing areas in which they live because then they're going to be more invested. But I just think the pendulum maybe has swung a little bit too far with judges. And now there are great judges. I think that I get text messages all the time. I wish you would talk about the good judges. And every single appearance I've ever done, I've said, there are good judges out there. There are great judges out there. I don't get many stories of that, and I do think it's because there are less of those good stories, at least right now.
Well, I think that's right. And usually when I'm pointing out something that a judge has gone, has done poorly, and this is, I'm only a few months out of litigating, so I'm sort of still wearing that hat to a certain extent. I'm thinking about, in this instance, the judge did the wrong thing, didn't follow the law in this instance. Not that this is a bad judge, that they did something incorrect or they didn't follow the law. I'm appealing because this is not correct. And I'm still looking at it that way, where I can see a judge doing something incorrect. That doesn't mean they're a bad judge. God knows I made tons of mistakes as a litigator. I would make just as many mistakes as a judge. I think it becomes concerning where there is intent, there's clear bias, there is a pattern, there is a disregard for the rules and just my way is the highway. I think that's different than when judges make a mistake. And
I agree.
When you ask me about, good judges versus bad judges, I don't have like a super clear answer because I can say things that just about every single judge has done that I've really, really admired and thought, man, I wish all the judges would be that easy to go back and correct their errors when you point them out. I mean, there's certain ones that I have appealed multiple times and have opinions against, that I way too often point out the problems with, have done things throughout the cases that I thought were absolutely great. And then there are others that I think in general, I've always appreciated when I walk out of their courtroom, win or lose. I appreciate the way they handled it.
Yeah.
And I think that happens quite a bit. But you're right. People aren't going to go online and fume and write comments about, when a judge has done things correctly. And that's not terribly fair. It's also less interesting to the public when people are doing things well.
Yeah, I'm 2 years out, and I will tell you that there is a component the further out you get where you're like, whoa, we were doing this wrong. Like the system is operating in a way that is perpetuating bad outcomes for families and kids and litigants wrapped up in it. Like Dan Cannon, have you ever read his book about the plea bargaining? Where that's like the biggest problem within our system is our system where we have plea bargains, because if you don't take the plea, it incentivizes taking the plea. Like, because if you go,
it absolutely does.
100. And I think that was the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And obviously plea bargaining was meant to resolve cases or get people to take accountability and get less time or get them in treatment, yada, yada. But I do think that maybe it's just gotten out of control where it's like a prosecutor is like, well, if you don't take this deal, then you're going to get 20. And that's sick. I mean, that's a human being to some degree, Yeah,
well, I mean, it's the adversarial system. Yeah. Like, so when I think, when I came into family practice and I was an attorney in a totally different realm in international environmental law and moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where that career doesn't exist. And I tried some cases in different subject matters and found that I liked family law because you're arguing to a judge. You're arguing to someone who ultimately, at least in theory, knows the rules, knows the law. You're not arguing and having to translate everything to a jury. So you can make the kind of arguments that you're thinking about in your head that you would want to put in your pleadings, and that you could, to a certain extent, predict. It's hard with the jury. Yeah, you might be involved in picking your jury, but you don't really know how they're going to act, when they get together in a room. With a judge, the more times you've been in front of him or her, you sort of know what you're getting. You know what to prepare for. I like that aspect of it. One of the things that really struck me coming into family law, at least in how family court works in Kentucky, which is a very progressive system, way out in front of most of the other states in putting together a specialized system to deal with family issues, is on its face, it seems like a much more humane, smart way to deal with soft issues involving kids, involving people's personal details and personal lives, than to just have the typical adversarial hearing in front of a jury where someone else is just deciding your fate that easily. And you had all of these other tools. You have parenting coordinators and friends of the court and GALs. And
in theory, it looks great.
Yeah. And like you said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But then it becomes becomes a machine, and it's a machine that develops its own habits and biases, and it evolves outside of what was intended by the law and the regulations. And the lawmakers who set the system up would probably be shocked to see how the system actually works now that it's evolved and it's grown all of these different tentacles. And yeah.
What do you think the checks are? Like, what are the checks on the judiciary right now? Are there any?
I don't know of any. We talked briefly about there used to be the form you could file, like if a court, just for the specific issue of untimely ruling. So if a judge is sitting on something for a long time, we used to have a form we could fill out. It went to Frankfurt to the administrative office of the courts, and they checked in to see if they could move things along. And to a certain extent, the judges would know that if they took too long, someone was sort of paying attention and watching. That was a small check. You have the Supreme Court, which regulates all of the judges. And In extreme cases, attorneys can bring things before the Supreme Court alleging things about the judges. So there's the check. But that's sort of a check in the same way bar complaints are against attorneys. Yet nobody wants one. We all try to act in a way that doesn't happen, but is it something you're thinking about every single day or even every week or even every month?
No, not
it's
at
probably
all.
not even not something that, and it's something that's every now and then someone will throw around, and it's usually some meaningless thread, and it's not something you're really terribly worried about. So I can't imagine the judges are thinking about, those really rare circumstances where somebody brings a motion before the Supreme Court about a judge.
Yeah, and I have some regrets, honestly, for filing a complaint against the TikTok judge for the selfie recording, in the sense that all I can say, obviously our ethics, but there was no public or private reprimand. That would be on the website if that happened. And that's all public record, but everything else is confidential. And I think that her knowing that a complaint was filed against her, that no one can ever see any process of that, and that nothing came from it, just emboldened her to, post a TikTok today during her docket. And I think that's like, what did I do? And now all the other judges are like, well, I mean, there's not going to be any consequence.
Well, I agree. I've had an instance where I had an order signed in a case, and it related to financials that were not before the court, that no one had ever heard. So this is a case I had back, it's probably 13, 14 years ago. I had a case, high asset case. We were early on in the case. Then in the mail, I get an order that requires my guy to pay like $10,000 worth of financial stuff on behalf of the other party every month. And no disclosures have been filed. So what that means is no financial information has been put before the court at all. No one has filed any motions, and it talked about specific accounts in the order. So clearly the judges talked to someone and learned something outside of the pleadings, outside of that. So I went knowing that the attorney on the other side was close to the judge, or had been in the past, and had other cases in front of the judge. I went and watched motion hour video and saw an interaction up on the bench, at the bench, that was recorded, where the judge asked that attorney about the case I was involved in and whether his client was getting paid. And when he said no, she told him to bring an order by and said she'd be there this afternoon. And shortly thereafter, I get an order. So these things are happening off the record. I brought that up to the Supreme Court. I brought a motion to remove her from the case. It got denied without much explanation. There was never any that I had seen published, nothing public anyway, where there was any reprimand, that anything was actually done about it. It was a very short order denying my motion, didn't get into the merits, didn't talk about anything.
Denying your motion to have her recused?
To have her recused for just blatantly ex parteing and telling the other side to come by and ex parte and bring an order by, when no motion was filed. Nothing was done to the judge, and the chief judge at the time in Louisville reallocated the case to his courtroom, took her off the case. So on a local level, my client was protected and the case got taken away from that judge, but nothing was done to the judge.
But how many times do you think that happened?
It's hard to speculate. But the fact that it was that blatant, I raised it. I took it up to the body that regulates judges. Nothing was done. I think if judges know they can get away with something like that, then there is no worry whatsoever about the regulating bodies.
Absolutely. I mean, you should probably you should be suspended from the bench, obviously, for that. But I would say that's a major ethical violation just for having a law license.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think if I went an ex parte to judge, I could get suspended from practice.
Oh.
So a judge just inviting people to come by and bring orders that they will sign with no hearing and nothing before the court, I just can't imagine. So I know that stuff happens.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I certainly wouldn't allege something like that if I didn't have video of it actually happening. And I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I remember bringing it to the attention of the clerks and the staff that worked in the family court at the time, and there's been a whole lot of turnover since then, so it's not the same people. None of them were surprised. They said that they'd heard about that kind of stuff. They knew it was happening. They were very happy. In fact, it was funny. I filed that with the Supreme Court. I went and had to ask. I'd never done anything like that. I went and had to ask the clerks down at 700 West Jefferson, first floor in the family court, how to do it. And there was this one clerk She was the head of adoptions at the time, and she was just always so prickly with me. Like there was just something like oil and water. Like she just acted like, and I was a young practitioner. I made a lot of mistakes, or I would have to ask too many questions, but she just seemed so annoyed with me. I brought that motion by and was asking where I needed to file it, how it went through the process. She came around outside, away from the desk, and came up and gave me a hug because I was filing that against this judge, because they had so many people saying the same things and all this kind of stuff about her. This person didn't like me, came and gave me a hug for doing something about it.
But just to extrapolate that like further, how often this is happening, how many like of my followers will say something that I may perceive initially like is crazy. There's no way that happened. And then you hear that this happened. And that person was on the bench for many years. That person is no longer on the bench, right?
No, no longer on the bench.
But you just, some of the stuff you can't make up. And then that's where I get weird as far as talking about these good judges that I maybe respect or admire, is you hang out with someone that does that. You're okay with someone doing that because you guys are all in the same club. Like,
yeah, but first of all, so just in the few short weeks that we've been working together, I've learned so much that has just blown my mind. And I know that other people are experiencing this all the time, but I didn't know about it. When I was working hard and I was working around the clock as a litigation attorney, I knew this kind of stuff was going on, but I was worried about getting through my stuff. I fully understand that these judges, the ones that are working hard and doing their good job, have way more work than they can ever get done. And let's say a judge is 2 floors up from someone downstairs. How often are they interacting other than the kind of events that, I don't even like going to, with the bar, that I just, I don't enjoy a lot of the social public stuff as much as some. And so how would a specific judge on the 3rd floor in the upper divisions know that what the ones downstairs are doing and be aware of it and be complicit in it? I don't know how much.
I don't think they have a duty to seek out that information, right? No. Like, I don't think they have a duty to go to someone's courtroom and watch how they conduct business. But I do think once something is told to them once, twice, 100 times, they have an absolute duty to look at it differently.
When that happened, I went to another judge who I had a lot of respect for. I won't name her name here just because I got you. I haven't talked to her about it, and then being involved in this, whatever. She was keenly interested. She told me how to go get I don't remember if the videos were, if the DVD system was pretty new back then. I mean, this was quite some time ago, but told me exactly what to do, what to look at, and to come to talk to her about it. At the time, she was the chief judge, and it changed while my case was up in front of the Supreme Court. Fantastic. Really interested that this stuff was going on. Wanted to see what happened. Like, I'm not talking about just paying lip service. I'm talking about really concerned that was going on the bench there. So
that's great to hear.
I think, and I have no idea. That's why I don't want to raise any names, because I don't know how much she had to do with the case moving out of the judge's division. It would not shock me if that's what she was doing behind the scenes to protect. But also I know that even the chief judge position over there doesn't really have power over the other judges. So none of the judges have, while they may have an obligation to report certain things that they know specifically about, they don't have any power themselves to do anything about it.
Which, I mean, is in and of itself, though, the bigger problem. Like, these are the people that are in charge of making all the decisions about our lives. I mean, taking away all of your constitutionally protected rights to parent, to liberty. I mean, you can incarcerate people, take their property, take their finances, take their children. And it's just, it's a hard system, or, it's not their job. And it's just, if this is the best we can do, we should just give up.
Yeah, I mean, we have that at all levels of government. The people that are at the top that make the biggest decisions don't necessarily have someone that's micromanaging and is able to determine. I mean, let's say you go to the state legislature. How much does one person maybe on one side of the aisle know about what the other people are doing behind the scenes? If they catch them or, they have evidence of something, certainly they raise it, but.
Well, I mean, Mitch McConnell was dancing to explicitive language at a Christmas party. It's going to be all over the media.
Yeah, the media is different, though. The media, okay, so to a certain extent, the media is an important part of our political system for shining lights on things, but they also know that Mitch McConnell dancing to a song that uses inappropriate language is going to get views, and people are going to be interested in it a lot more than a judge talking to one person and while no one else is present on it. I mean,
I don't think so.
Interesting. Well,
I don't think so. I think people will eat this up. I mean, I think people will be like, you have actual proof, and it validates them. I think it's very similar to police brutality. Like, I think that was percolating for years and years, and there was this conversation about it that's happening. And then all of a sudden, 2020, we're all locked down. We got those 3 cases. And everyone, it validates their feelings. And I think it does. The judges have gotten out of control.
By the time 2024 rolled around, people have forgotten all about it. And I don't know. I'm hoping that there will be a larger, longer term interest in this kind of stuff. And in fact, I'm banking on it, and I'm making it, something that I'm willing to work hard on. But the police brutality thing, that was so deflating to me that there was just this whole movement and everyone's eyes were open to it. And then the term that was used for labeling yourself as aware that the system is broken becomes a bad word, and no one wants to associate it with it. It's like, wow, it can turn that quickly. And programs that are meant to avoid that kind of stuff are now taboo and illegal in some places. So
that's the money machine, the political machine. That's why, go back to your beginning of this podcast or this conversation. Why did Joan want to talk and be a source for the media? Because if you're a source for the media, you can control the narrative in all instances. And if something happens in the future, they're going to go to you.
Well, that's true. But I mean, I will say that I worked on the campaign that she won to be on that term. I don't know how many terms she served, because she was on the bench when I started practicing here in Louisville. One of the things I liked is she was very shrewd. She had no problem saying what her opinions were at all. It's one of the things I respected about her when I first when I got to know her off the bench, was that she's just very plain spoken. And it was just always...
Did you ever ask her about the ex parte thing?
Personally?
Yeah.
No, because I chose... I was angry enough about it, and basically giving up my practice in 1 out of 10 divisions here in the county where I work.
Yeah.
That once I was able to get past that, I didn't want to revisit it, and I've just avoided interactions because it's just... It's still hard for me to even think about having a conversation about it. I would be so angry because there isn't anything that could be said. There's nothing that could change my mind about it. It was just blatant. This is what it is. It's black and white. You did this. There's not gray area. There's not, it's because of this, or there's exigent circumstances. None of that. There's no emergencies. There was nothing. You just did a favor for somebody that you liked. And
then you'd been on her campaign. So it's not like you've even got any loyalty there. You know what I mean? But yeah, I've reached out to the person that ex parte'd, that was an attorney at the time and that is now a judge.
I was thinking when that happened on that case, I thought, wow.
Well, and I think that they've gotten so quote unquote powerful. And by powerful, I mean small fish in a big pond. Or what's the saying? Is it big fish in a small pond? Yeah, big fish in a small pond. But a lot of my followers think that you get loyalty, that they're favorites, attorneys and stuff like that. And there may be, but generally speaking, they're just yelling at all of us at this point.
Well, the funny thing is there's been some divisions I've walked in and I've had... This is especially true on the court-appointed dockets, right? So if you're going in on dependency, neglect, and abuse, or paternity, or something like that, and the judge has the same attorneys that represent the kids, the parents, and they're in front of the judge all the time, and you come in, especially on like a dependency, neglect, and abuse docket, most cases, the great majority of cases, don't have private attorneys from outside of that system. They're either pro se, or they're a party that automatically gets an attorney appointed, and they're from that group that always practices in front of that judge. So I would step in, someone would have the money to retain private counsel to come in and fight because things weren't going the way they were supposed to go, or it was taking 5 times longer than the statute allowed, or something like that. So I would get involved in those cases from time to time. And I would come into these divisions and someone would pull me aside, people that I was friendly with, that also worked on that docket, that would tell me, watch out. I saw that you were bringing this motion. We've all been talking about it. We saw it come through on this docket. The judge really loves this person and is going to do whatever she says across the board. So you may want to think about asking for it in a different way or trying to present it a different way, because you're always going to lose this because of this person has favor with this judge and just gets relied on all the time. And whatever she says will go no matter how outlandish it is. And sure enough, it seemed to be, the next year or so, I would see things like that happen. And then all of a sudden I would be told that there was a falling out and that the opposite would be happening. And that then I started noticing them fighting like an old married couple up at the bench. And I'm just thinking, I know that kind of stuff does happen. But from a practitioner point of view, knowing that, I know how to prepare my client.
Yeah.
So there's certain, I kind of, it goes back to that thing about knowing what you're getting instead of having these things decided by an unpredictable jury.
But so dependency, neglect, and abuse, the best way I would describe it for anybody that's curious is it's CPS cases, right? So it's like if the Cabinet for Health and Family Services is involved, there's an allegation, they're going to offer services, they're going to remove kids. That's it. And so most of the way our statutes work is everybody gets appointed an attorney and the taxpayers pay, and it's a flat rate. Okay, very different than what you see when we're talking about some of these court-appointed people billing hourly. But rarely, if ever, do private attorneys go on those dockets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm in my career in Jefferson County, I would say maybe 5, maybe 10. And there could be more, but just not my jam. I didn't want to sit around all day. You didn't want to get home cooked, and it's also just depressing.
All three, very accurate.
So, this is how I would describe dependency, neglect, and abuse court. You've got babies addicted to drugs. You've got caregivers, physically abusing children. You have children overdosing after getting access to drugs. You have...
Or being addicted upon birth.
Yeah. And you have, a baby that they can't find placement for because a family member can't take them. I mean, it is just the worst of the worst. A Debbie Downer, beyond the pale. But when you talk about how somebody gets favor in that court, these are significant constitutionally protected rights that are being messed with because maybe one social worker or maybe one GAL is a favorite that day, right?
No, absolutely. So there was a fundamental right to parent your child.
I could.
And I know that our legislators in Kentucky realized that there were problems on these dockets because they changed the law to protect, to a certain extent, the rights of foster parents to become parties to a case and have a say in the case once they reach an adoption stage. Whereas historically, the foster parents still in the DNA stage of the case prior to there being an adjudication and then a determination that it's moving toward adoption, they still don't have any say in anything. They're the ones doing all the heavy lifting. They're the ones raising the kid. They're the ones bonded with the child. They're the ones going to bat, taking time off work, showing up for every court appearance. They have no say. They're not represented. They don't have any rights in the cases. That change in the law indicates that somebody knew that the system wasn't working all that well. But in my opinion, it didn't go far enough, because what I see is a court and then this select set of attorneys that represent every parent and or child in that division, at least the accused ones, not the caregivers. They're not entitled to the representation. The foster parents don't get representation. The people that are accused, and there are important constitutional reasons for that. But when the judge is reliant on this same group of attorneys over and over again, and they're socializing with them, and I hear from attorneys that are on these dockets talk about the conversations they've had about my cases with the judge, and have told me to my face that, oh yeah, when I talked to the judge about this, and I'm thinking, you're not allowed to do that. But I know it's happening all the time. And some of these attorneys just walk in the back and they enter the courtroom every single time from the judge's office, from chambers, as if they're part of the judicial staff. And they've become that much of the system that I think when I come into those cases as a private attorney, I'm representing someone that doesn't have a court-appointed attorney. It's rare that anyone that gets a court-appointed attorney is going in those cases where I know that there are plenty of people that could get a public defender, criminal cases. Maybe they will change and hire an attorney. That doesn't really happen in dependency, neglect, and abuse very often. So when I'm coming in, I was always coming in for someone that doesn't have a right to a court-appointed attorney. So they're usually the people doing the hard work, the friend, the family member, the foster parent who has stepped up to take on a child. Now, I usually couldn't represent the foster parents because they're not parties until it got to the adoption stage, but representing fictive kin cases, representing grandma who is the one that's raised the child since it came home addicted to cocaine from the hospital. Those are the people I would come in and represent. And it was so clear so many times I would be there waiting around. As you said, there's always waiting. You show up, it's a
Hours.
Cattle call. They discuss the cases in conference rooms. Then they slowly, once the case has been decided on or it can't be decided on, it has to have a hearing, it goes in front of the judge and it just sits in a pile and they get called one at a time. The number of times where things have been called and discussed and no one comes to get me because the group talks about them. I don't get invited in there. I'm representing a party. I have a right to every single discussion. They go in, they put it in front of the judge. They have the judge sign something. And my client doesn't even get to know that the discussion's taking place and you're excluded from it.
Okay, so this is Jefferson County. This is a Jefferson County thing.
It's not just Jefferson County.
It's a Jefferson County thing in the sense that there is this closed courtroom. Okay, everywhere when I practiced in Eastern Kentucky, domestic violence, like everyone comes into the courtroom and they just call the cases.
Yeah, that's different. Domestic violence is different. That's not a sealed docket. It's treated as
true.
confidential here, but.
So I used to sit in on all of the dependency, neglect, and abuse dockets when I was public defender because I was a juvenile public defender. They were J cases. They were on the same day. We didn't have a family court.
See.
So you would see. You never had any of that. Like they would call the cases and it would be conference during a conference time. There wasn't that level of ex parte that I ever saw. Like even with private attorneys that would come in, where Louisville is very different in that regard. Louisville is very much like this is a closed circuit. We're not letting anybody else in my experience.
I can think of two other counties where I've seen just the blatant ex parte stuff where the maybe one, where the GAL on, 3/4 of the cases that I ever practiced on would be, on breaks would be in the back hanging out with the judicial staff. Now, do I know that they're back there talking about the case? No, I don't. Do I think that my client could ever in a million years think the judge is
fair,
is objective on that case and isn't speaking to an attorney who represents a party in that case? When they both walk out together after each break? No. It's just even just the appearance was so
they're doing that on the record. Like your client saw it?
Oh, sure. Well, it's not on the record because we haven't gone back on the record yet.
Yeah, you haven't pushed
We're taking a break. Everyone walks out. Some people walk to the back. And I know of 2 counties off the top of my head where it was just regular practice. The GALs had maybe like a desk back there with the staff attorney.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they're judicial staff and they're an attorney representing the children regulated by the same rules. And the judge has to treat them like every other attorney on the case. But I know that I know that it's happening. And frankly, it gets talked about enough. I've had enough conversations with people that have acted in that role that talk about how often they talk with the judge.
Well, that's another thing that's concerning is how often these third parties, GALs, FOCs will say I had one blatantly tell me there's no way the judge is going to believe that person over me. And I thought that is an insane thing to say out loud. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. But I can think of a small handful of people, one really in particular where I know that that's the case. The judge is just, the same person that Judge Gatewood in the Adair case asked, basically, what are we doing here? And you hear that same language. So what are we doing here? And then this one person that's been appointed by the judge says what we're doing here.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that on the record, but I've never seen, it's bizarre to say it like behind the scenes.
But I couldn't talk about cases and without bringing up an anecdote about some judge that done something horrible. I was carrying a huge grudge because I saw how it affected my clients and their children and the children they were taking care of and how it did. And it consumed me. It was just terrible.
Doesn't it bother you though, like how many people are lawyers that aren't willing to speak up?
Oh, Oh, that kills me. There are attorneys that I have great respect for their intellectual ability, their ability to practice, who have come to me and said, "Oh, I can't believe. I'm glad you filed that motion. I never would have taken a judge on like that, because how would it affect the next time you went in front of him and all of this?" And my response is always like, I represent my client.
Yeah.
I can't not fight for my client. When a judge does something blatantly wrong and it costs my client custody or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's vindictive, I am not allowed to say, well, the judge will get mad at me if I do something about it, and then sell my client out by not speaking up and doing something about it. I think that is not practicing your case, and you're violating your duty as an attorney.
100%. Like, it's like, did you just hear yourself out loud? You said I wouldn't advocate for my client because the judges would get mad at me.
That's exactly right.
Well, and that's
I
what
wouldn't
happened to
take
me.
on a judge.
Yeah, I mean, that is 100% what happened in my situation. And I still sometimes I'm just like shocked at the whole. It was just so obvious, that any attorney could realize that situation could have happened to them.
And I mean, I will say it was a much bigger deal the first time I had to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a young attorney, and I mean, my income to my family was critical, and there was definitely going to be a change in what cases I could take and what I couldn't. And it was before I had a practice with, 20-ish attorneys that I could shuffle cases around, and I could just not practice in front of a judge for a while and send someone else in there. Couldn't do that. It was like, you're not going to make any money on this percentage of cases. It is not an easy thing to have to do, but it is also very clear what is right and wrong. It's very clear what I have to do in my duty to my client. Doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children, obviously, and so I can't imagine I have the flexibility to not have that dependency. You know what I mean? So when I was done with it, I was just like, I'm not going to participate in this. And it's hard to think about from that standpoint, but I've always been of the mentality there are more of us than there are them. I don't understand the fear of authority. Like, these family court judges, especially in Louisville, or even some of the judges in Louisville, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I just wasn't raised to be scared of lazy people. I mean, you should be scared of some judges in Eastern Kentucky, okay? I mean, they're hard workers. They're connected. There are systems there. There are things. But are you, scared? Am I scared of any Louisville judge? No.
No.
Intellectually, physically.
I wasn't worried about that. I was worried. And given how quickly, when I did it, how many people came out and said that they were glad I spoke out, and the stories I heard, that people that had been through the same thing, even when I was a much younger attorney, and I was just fighting for the biggest client at the time I had ever had.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, that this was going on, and so often. And I think a lot of it isn't just out of fear. I think there's just complacency. I think it's so much of it is, this is the system we practice in front of. If most of the judges are going to do this, and this is just going to keep happening, it just doesn't seem like, to me, maybe I was way too idealistic. And the previous crop of judges, we did have some people that they seemed like the judge that's in your head when you're in law school. When it stays above it all. Everybody has their quirks. Everyone has their issues. But you came in with you treated the judge with respect. The judges treated everyone else with respect. Like, you could have been having a conversation. You could have run into each other at the lobby and just been shooting the crap about something that you're both interested in or be friends. But when you walked in that courtroom, it was very formal. And all of that went away. And that was just when you saw a judge do something as a favor to someone else, ex parte, completely against the rules, it seemed like it was just this shining error that had to be addressed. And I think that nowadays, I mean, how many things have you heard in the last 48 hours that people have told you that this is going on or that's going on? How many emails have we received where people just outline that, oh, this happened yesterday or the day before? This is just part of the system, and I think the attorneys see it so often, it just becomes something you have to account for, something you just have to tell your client about. Back before, and you stopped practicing when they still did assignment in Jefferson County of cases based on last name.
Yes.
So you could sit down at an initial meeting and say, okay, your last name is this. Here's who you're going to be in front of.
Oh, yeah.
Here's how your case is going to go. when that went away, oh man, that was my consultations had to be longer because I would say, okay, this kind of case, if you end up over here, here's how I could see it going. If you end up here, we're not ever going inside the courtroom, and it's worth spending some money to settle on something to not going in front of this judge. But I don't know which one you're going to be in front of. It became so much harder. But that's only because we just accepted it as part of the system, as a part of what we had to navigate.
So, okay, I have no idea because in Louisville, which the other county judges would get mad about this, but it was always the mom's last name is how your divorce was filed.
And then there's some new rules that came in after Obergefell, and we were divorcing people of same-gendered couples.
Oh, for sure. It was the petitioner. Yeah. But when it changed, like, so when you go in and you get hired, we file the petition or we draft everything up, and then you go to CourtNet and you hit that click button, right? Do you get assigned that second, or is it like the next day?
I don't know.
You have
I'm
staff.
embarrassed to say that I haven't filed a case in many years. I believe that it creates an envelope. It doesn't get assigned immediately. But then, you know how you file pleadings, you will pretty quickly get something out that says it's been accepted, or there's something similar with your case, and it'll have a file stamped copy that you can download of all the pleadings that you filed at the initial part of the case, and it has the division on it. So I knew very quickly.
Okay.
We had flagged who we got in front of, and it was part of the scuttlebutt in the office that if you had a case that had a specific issue and everyone knew it would be, you're going to be in for it if we run into this division, everyone was talking about it. I would always find out because I'd hear some people in my office talking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe we got this judge on this case.
I could just hear the curse words coming out of my mouth if I filed like a divorce, low asset divorce, and you drew Division 7. Like, I'd have to get out. I don't know. I need to look into that.
There's certain ones that if we were going to have to try more complex issues and want to really put a lot of evidence in and have the judge rule on the evidence and establish a good record, there are certain judges I'd want to be in front of, even if there were things that they did that I think I appreciate. I don't have to wait 6 months for a hearing and I can get in front of you very quickly, but I also don't want to have to argue in front of someone that's just going to yell at me.
I don't know. I think when you're 2 years out of that too, it's like your job is to hear my case. Your job is to hear my case. And all of the things, you got to buy circuit time. You've got to do this. Why do you want to be a judge if you don't want to adjudicate the case? Like, sometimes I wonder why they want us to settle so badly. Now, not that I don't think you should settle as opposed to going to court, but like, don't they like the law? Like, if you were a judge, wouldn't you want to be in court?
Some judges hate having hearings, and it's so obvious they will put it off. Anybody has the slightest thing. Well, I have a conflict. I'm trying to move. Well, I think you might not be able to move it, so maybe we should just go ahead and reschedule. And just like, that's not how continuances work. There are rules. There are things that have to happen. Quit having hearings. And there was one in particular in our last, I say crop of judges, that the judges that were before the judges that are currently on the bench, who would everyone would get there. It would be for a trial. You might have been fighting over these issues. You might have had 2 or 3 hearings. You can't resolve them. You've had mediations. You've had settlement conferences. You were there to try it because the courts, for any reasonable people, are a place of last resort. If you can settle your stuff and handle things like a responsible human, if you can get 2 responsible, rational human beings, they shouldn't have to be in court. There's a reason why something's happening. Or every now and then, everyone is calm and rational, and you just have an interesting legal issue that no one knows. But that's rare. These people were in court because they were never going to get this settled. And it happened time and time again. This judge would always call counsel in to chambers. And there's nothing wrong with it because they're talking to everybody. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it was just strong arm into settling. And I practiced in federal court when I first moved to Louisville in 2005. And they would do the same thing. They'd sit down, why are we having this hearing? Why are we going to have to call a jury on this issue? Here are the numbers I think it's probably worth. Now, the jury's going to make a decision later, but maybe you should go get your case settled. And it was effective. It worked. They didn't have any say. They couldn't actually decide that, but they had an interest in freeing their docket up, and they could look. And, sometimes I think a judge can see the bigger picture than I know when I was a litigant. It was hard for me to step back and see the bigger picture. One of the things I loved about working on a team of people I had people that were not down in the weeds of a case and could tell me maybe I'm getting lost on this and I need to step back. I think sometimes the judge has that role, but there are some of them that just do it all the time because they never want to have to sit there and sit through a hearing. And at least that's my opinion, but it becomes so clear that you just don't want to make a decision on this. You don't want to hear it out.
Yeah, and I think just like our family court releases their docket, like our district court judges won't even do that. I think there may be, hell, there's no one on the bench right now. It's probably 4 o'clock, so everybody's been home for 2 hours, allegedly. But I digress. I've been pulling all of the weekly dockets, and I've gone to see when the hearings are scheduled, and then you go to CourtNet to see if there was a hearing.
Sure.
How many times do you think those hearings were resolved? A lot. But I think they do it to just be like, hey, I'm working. Like I found one that was submitted by an agreed order like 3 weeks prior, and it was still like a half-day trial.
And it's still on the calendar. Yeah. Now, to be fair, there's been a couple judges that I've talked to. Man, it's been a while, but judges that I practiced in front of earlier in my career, you spent a lot of time in chambers, and they would sit down with both attorneys, and you would have conversations, and you would try to work things out, and the judge would want to get an idea of what the issues were before going in. I thought it was really helpful because you felt you didn't have to start big picture and spell out the issues for the judge, which if the judge, as a smart practitioner, you're going to start high level and then work into the details, but you get limited time in family court. You are supposed to get half the time, the allotted time. So if a judge brought us in and we could get to the chase, cut to the chase, and their whole role was to go in there and you put on the factual evidence and make your argument, I always appreciated that. I was surprised in the past when we would get things settled, the judges that would be like, that's fantastic. I'm going to leave it on the docket because I am so backed up with orders, getting orders out. So I know some of them would just leave it blocked off to get their work done. I didn't really have a problem because I was probably waiting for orders. But also,
you work for me. You are a taxpayer. I want to know how often you're in court, period.
Yeah, I think I can't say I disagree with you on it, but I did see them getting caught up. Whereas they could have taken it off the docket and they have control and the ability to not schedule anything. They could have just done it a different way. But a lot of them, I know. So in the latter years of my career, I was getting involved more and more on some of the confidential cases, or I would have confidential cases that were, because they were high profile, they were sealed, whether they should have been or not. My opinion as a member of the public is different than as an advocate for one of the sides, and it has to be.
Right.
But I pretty regularly had to go over to the court to get a judge to sign something to allow me to see a case file. So we regularly, there is a form, it's an order that goes into the case that says this person, and would name my name. I would fill it out, the affidavit, and sign it, and then the judge would sign it as an order. And it would say, I have an interest that should allow me to examine that case file. And it may not allow me to take any of it or copy it or do anything else, but that either someone's retained me or I have an interest in it. And I would have to go looking for a judge to do that. And how many times I went around and I could see what was on the door.
Yeah.
They would have their dockets posted, and there would be a hearing. And the door would be locked, the lights would be off. It was clear there's no hearing. Now, did it cancel right before? We canceled hearings. Cases settled right before. So some of those times, I'm sure it canceled right before, and they had printed that thing out the day before, but there's nobody there.
But
I couldn't find. I would have to go on every single time, unless I got lucky. I'd have to go at least on all 3 floors looking for one judge to be there on an afternoon.
They have there's law enforcement that are trying to get warrants signed in district court, and there's no one.
There's just nobody there. I'm not familiar with how it is in district court. It was my practice was just a standard practitioner. You had your 9 o'clock rounds. You went and did your cases at 9. You did your 1 o'clock, and you were gone way before the workday closed over there, and you were back at your office doing other things. So I rarely, if ever, had to find judges over there. I can't even think of circumstances where I had to actually find judges.
I think that's what, like Judgy talking about why we're doing this. I think Judgy can just go to court and see. if it's Tuesday, let's pick a time for next week. Tuesday, pick a time during the workday, not during lunch. You pick one randomly.
Oh, just like 1:30.
Yeah. Okay, 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Let's go to the courthouse and let's see how many of the 37, 39 judges there are. Wait, 13, 10, 16, right, 39.
Yep.
How many do you think? Let's make a bet.
Oh, God. This is my experiences with family court. Maybe it's the same across. I always am naive enough to think, it's better in other courts.
LOL.
And then when I practice in front of them, I realize this is just how it works. Other counties too, other jurisdictions. I practice in multiple states. But if I was going to base it on the percentage, I would think in family court, I'd say, oh man, at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, 1:30 is early enough.
How sad is this whole conversation right now?
But I would say between 50 and 60%. If you got up to 3:30 or 4 and you asked me, it would be a totally different number.
I think we need to give them like some grace. So we need to just pick a time and then go like at different weeks. But I would say that I would bet of the 39 judges, I would say, because it is a Tuesday. So if you get into Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays too, you're going to have less.
Friday. Let's say Friday at 3 o'clock.
4 judges, maybe. I would say that there'll be 12 judges at the courthouse.
At 1:30 on a Tuesday? Oh, I think I'd take that bet.
You think more?
I do, but I don't know that I'd bet a lot of money on it.
I was going to say, we can bet a beer. This will be fun. I think this is the kind of stuff, though, that judges should do. Because what if I'm crazy? What if you're crazy and these judges are working 60 hours a week and they're at the courthouse? That's what I mean.
And if
we're wrong,
then let's report it and let's tell everybody.
Apologize. I will apologize until the cows come.
I agree. And frankly, if you're not there and all of your orders are out, and as a practitioner, I've gotten everything back that I should have, and you've completed your hearing and you want to give your staff the afternoon off and be nice and you're gone, you may not be doing what you're supposed to be doing, but I got a problem with it.
I agree.
My issue is if you are a judge and I've been waiting 8 months for something and we can't get a kid enrolled for medical care or something. We've been waiting 8 months and I cannot find you no matter what. And we cannot get a hearing in front of you for months and you're just not at work. That's a huge problem.
Huge.
It's a huge failure of what the public, of their service to the public.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Okay. All right. Well, I feel like we should be at a wrap for today.
You're so deep.
We need some justice. My life is fine, justice.